Andy Borkowski here for Dialogue Wheel, joined this week, Anton Mack. As always, we're in a slightly different studio talking about very, very similar things. Starts with an M, ends with an A? No, it's a second word. There's three words. I made a mistake. Mass Effect Andromeda is in the news yet again. Mr. Macadeg, how many hours did you put into Andromeda?
Too many. I hate that game now. But I'd say closer to like maybe 80, 90 hours.
And you played as a woman, and you were trying to be as evil as you could, and it wasn't really an option.
Yeah, no, things just ended up the same at the very end.
Wasn't very renegade. Not a very renegade game.
It was disappointing.
Now, to get your renegade up, gain some points in that sphere, did you know that it's very likely there will not be a single-player DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda? I'm sorry, hey.
Are you lying?
No, don't use that interrupt on me. Don't use that renegade interrupt. Don't punch me in the face. Say my reporting is disingenuous. Boom. Mass Effect 3, no? Anyone's? Yes. In the last week or so, there's been a lot of consternation about the validity of any single-player DLC for a game series and a company that is famous for making DLC, and excellent DLC for their story-based games, will likely not have any. So we at VGS and Dialogue Wheel thought it would be appropriate to discuss this, our thesis. Mass Effect Andromeda needs single-player DLC.
Agreed.
All right, there he is. All right, bye, guys. All right. So how this all came up, last week there is an organization called Sinclair Networks that claimed online, yeah, exactly. They claimed online that they were originally outsourced to make a single-player DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda, but we're no longer doing it, so there's not going to be a single-player DLC. Many individuals at BioWare, specifically producer Mike Gamble, who was on the show, said, a little plug there, said, never heard of Sinclair Networks ever, and the same thing was said by Fernando Mello, who is a producer on Mass Effect Andromeda, who's been very active on Twitter, that basically has been the voice from BioWare because they're not saying much. And this led to another issue because a lot of articles then popped up suggesting that there would be no DLC. That was squashed, but no sooner was that rumor squashed than 2 or 3 more Hydra heads just popped up. One, we got Jason Scheer from Kotaku, who is the guy that did that incredible expose on Mass Effect Andromeda. He has a couple of inside sources. We tried to get him on the show. He said, no, thank you, respectfully. So that's nice. He actually did send us an email saying no thanks. So that, Jason, you're a good guy. I like your work. But he said in his articles that according to those sources, there is no single-player DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda. Eurogamer has similar sources. They did some investigation into Sinclair Networks, and their sources at BioWare, or at EA rather, said pretty much the same thing. And what makes it worse, we haven't heard anything from the BioWare team or the folks at EA to suggest otherwise. In fact, we've heard a lot to convince us of the inverse. Fernando Mello has been saying that there's more he wants to talk about, but all we saw this week is more multiplayer DLC, specifically the Platinum difficulty multiplayer. You and I played a bunch of multiplayer in Andromeda. It's fun, but it's not something we're going to be playing. Well, we're not playing it now, but it's not something you would play a couple months after the game comes out.
Yeah, I feel as if there's no like lasting thing to it, because it's not like an Overwatch. It's not like a Call of Duty where there's reason for me to come back. Like, yeah, it's cool. I get skins and stuff like that, but I don't really care. There's no lore attached to it.
What if I told you that you could play as a Batarian?
Who?
All right, not the biggest Mass Effect fan. The Batarians were the multi-eyed little pig-faced creatures from the originals. And in this DLC, they have somehow explained away that a Batarian was a pirate and was able to hitch a ride with the Solarians because they promised on the Arcs. Because remember, the Arcs in the lore of the single player were usually delegated for specific species. And apparently these Batarians were just great-ass fighters and were able to go. This leads a lot of people to believe that there will be a single-player DLC because they had to model and create in their new engine a Batarian race. It's a whole new race that we haven't seen in the new Andromeda sphere because it's a whole new engine from the original Mass Effect. So that would lead a lot of people to believe, hey, single-player DLC is coming. But I posit this. The great Twitter article, or not Twitter article, the Twitter users Mass Effect News have a little grid up comparing when other DLCs were announced for different games. You really should check it out because it's a fascinating look of when it did come out. We should be getting one right about now, if you look at the link here.
Yeah.
And we should be getting more than one. We should be getting at least 3. They're usually separated by a few months, and there's been no word, no rumor, nothing to that avail that we would have any DLC. So it's a little bit uncommon. But here's what I believe. I think that originally the folks at BioWare had a plan. This was a game that was 5 years in development, and somewhere in that 5-year plan, they said there's going to be at least 6 months to a year of DLC development. We're going to include it in the story, which they did with the Save the Quarians and the Benefactor Ket person at the end there, and we're going to develop it as we're, building up the game. That's what they do with DLC. It's not all done when the game is done, because I think it's really hard to make a game. So they were working on modeling Batarians and these other races, and then they heard about how Mass Effect did financially.
Oh, no, yeah. So apparently, EA was expecting to sell close to 3 million units during first week alone.
Yeah.
And this is off of, can I say the source?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right, so VG 24/7. Mm-hmm. But according to VG charts, after the first week, they only ended up selling 1.03 million units.
That's a third.
A third of
that is
their
30%
expected sales.
Even if he's inflating that, there's no way they're making their nut on this game. Because this is making games is such an expensive process. And if you sell a third in your first week, I don't know how much of a AAA failure you could be.
But to be fair, so those expected sales, we don't know what those are based off of. We don't know if those are projected numbers based on the popularity of the last trilogy, or because of the trends they expected to actually sell that much.
The internal EA frameworks, as it were.
So it could be something totally different, right? Their actual expected sales was closer to 2 million. Either way, Mass Effect Andromeda seems like it undersold significantly compared to what they wanted.
And had a lot of negative critical reception, which is not something they were looking forward to. And if Jason Scheer's story is correct, that a lot of the individuals who are working on Montreal have been pushed to other games, namely Anthem, to develop, then there's just not going to have the team there to even build the single-player DLC. So I don't know. Based on the information we have right now, I think it is close to 90% certain that we will not be seeing a single-player DLC because of the financial obligations, because they failed so bad, and because so much of the team is elsewhere. It doesn't seem like it's a great mix of alchemy to get those great DLCs that we love. What do you think?
I think that it's a big issue because,
if you could give it a number, what would you give it, a percentage chance?
Oh, the game itself as a review? Or
No, that there's going to be a single-player DLC.
Oh, as of right now, the information that you kind of provided, it seems like less than 10% right now that we are going to get a single-player. Once again, this is kind of as an outsider being told the information, I don't think we're going to get a DLC. Mm-hmm. I hope there is, because DLC can really save a game. At the time of BioShock 2, I was working at Unsaid Retail Store, because I'm not gonna out them. But BioShock 2 did trash. Nobody wanted the game because the reviews came in. It wasn't BioShock 1. Then Minerva's Den came out, and I saw an influx of people coming in just to purchase the game so that they in turn can go into the Minerva's Den with some knowledge of what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had the same experience, or not same experience, but
we look back at the game franchise that built this all.
Yeah.
Mass Effect. Mass Effect 3 had a very similar rollout. It still did gangbuster sales, but critically there were some issues. And the game developers were able to, at BioWare, really remedy a lot of those problems very, very quickly with the extended cut DLC and the Citadel DLC. And by doing that, they were able to show gamers that they, one, care about the consumers and they're listening to them, and that, two, they have the ability to tell cohesive stories. Now, Mass Effect Andromeda, you and I think are pretty much in agreement, is not a very good game.
Yeah, not really.
We spent a lot of time on it, and I love Mass Effect with all my heart. I love the people that make it. I know how hard it is to make a game, but a good DLC could save the Andromeda experience, because I think the core mechanics of the combat and even the how they're able to use the engine in this world, I think is really, really strong. And even there's a few story missions that are pretty okay. If you had a team that was trying to build up one thing, one conceit in this world, and use those core mechanics as a foundation, and just have people that really want to tell a story about maybe what is going on with the Krogans now, or something like that. Something that's specific, that's individual, that doesn't have to check off 1,000 different boxes. You could save people. And if they don't do this, like, how can you look at the Mass Effect franchise and hope that we'll have any future if you don't give it a DLC?
Well, like you said earlier, there are so many things that Mass Effect Andromeda ended off on. And, okay, I'm going to say this now, spoiler alert, if you haven't played Andromeda, you may want to tune out for a second or put on earmuffs. But at the end of Andromeda, they make mention of, the Quarian arc.
Yes.
And they're in deep peril, but don't go after them because they don't want you to come. So
not just yet.
Yeah, it's intriguing. That's one of those things where as soon as I saw that moment happen, I was like, okay, DLC is coming for sure, hands down. And hearing this, 5-6 months later, there's even less reason for me to go back to Andromeda.
And it's funny because if you look at Mass Effect 3, there was the Omega DLC with Arya T'Loak. I don't know if you remember that one. You go back to Omega with Arya. But they set it up kind of similar to the Quarian thing, where she's there saying, I'm going to need your help to do this. Not yet. Maybe buy this thing and I'm going to need your help. So they're using the same framework, and they built a Batarian. They did the modeling, and it's so devastating if they did all that work and it looks like it's not going to be used in an actual story. That is got to be a gut buster to these people.
I think it's also just kind of like, it's really telling your fan base to kind of F off. And because as much as we didn't like it, I'm a part of many different gaming groups because I've been on the PR side of things, and I'm on the consumer side of things. So many of my friends have different opinions based on Andromeda, but I will say a handful of them honestly enjoyed it. They didn't enjoy it as much as the trilogy, but as Mass Effect fans, they got something out of it. They found something in it, and that's really just kind of spitting in their face, saying, you know what, we don't care about this IP anymore because it didn't sell well. That's just bullshit. I hate it. I don't know.
Especially because BioWare was one of the individual companies that made some of the best DLCs.
Yeah.
Because they built up stories really, really well and did just what I said. They took one core conceit and ran with it. I think of my best gaming experiences in gaming. We have the BioShock DLC, Minerva's Den of BioShock 2. We have Ballad of Gay Tony with GTA 4.
Yes.
Talk about it all the time here. And then we have 2 or 3, I can't even pick one, from Fallout New Vegas's DLCs that focus so much on trying to tell an individual story. It can elevate your medium to be that much better. And like you said, there are people out there that are still BioWare fans that still want to see what's happening in the Mass Effect world. And if there's any chance, BioWare, that you can make a single-player DLC, if you can divert funds to make it happen, I really think it's a worthwhile investment. As much as we even dislike what the game came out as, I think it is an absolute necessity. Anton Mack, final word. What do you think?
BioWare needs to put some time and money into DLC for Andromeda. Yes, initially it did not do well, but like we've discussed, DLC can kind of bring up the sales of a game and, put it in a better light. Like you said, BioShock, one of the other Mass Effects, other games that didn't exactly do the best, that had fantastic DLC, ended up selling good. I just don't want all of your time being put into a new IP that could potentially be bad.
That's years away, too.
Exactly.
That's like a year and a half to 2 years away.
Yeah, so long away. And you have this IP that people hold dearly in their heart. Look at the subreddit. Look at just YouTube. People love Mass
BSN
Effect.
forums that they made up because they closed down the actual forums. So these other guys made new ones that are phenomenal. Mass Effect News. Tons of YouTubers that, again, make their nut this way. I don't know. What do you guys think? If you're watching this, one, do you believe that there is a 10% chance that there is going to be single-player DLC, considering what we know now? And how vital do you think it is? This is Andy Borkowski, Dialogue Wheel.